Today's class was on feudalism, and that's probably a word you've never heard. You've certainly never used it, but on the simplest of levels, it is the government of the Middle Ages. And before we got into the history, I asked you to talk about four things, and we talked for a long time. Wonderful conversations. And we talked about obligation, loyalty, respect, and poverty. And I asked you, what obligations, things you have to do, you might not want to do it, but things you have to do in your life. And it ranged from taking care of younger siblings to athletic training to work. I'm in economic hard times. I need to earn all of my money. Most of the time it was school, and we talked about why do some people handle their obligations so well and other people handle their obligations poorly? Also, you have a choice of what you value, of what obligation is the most important to you. Some people take school, it's their top priority. Other people, could really give a hoot. Why is that? And we talked about that. Great conversation. And then we moved on to loyalty. How do you show loyalty? Is there a difference in loyalty in a business relationship, a friendship, a romantic relationship? We had a lot of conversations, and I think it boiled around outward shows of loyalty. You better have actions. Words don't mean a whole lot. But in a time of need, if you're there, that's loyalty. If somebody's dogging you out or dogging a friend out and you support that friend, that's loyalty. Outward signs in romantic, relationships, showing a piece of jewelry that says, hey, I'm with this person, or wearing a wedding ring, or sharing your social media to make sure everything's on the up and up. These are some of the things that came up when it came to loyalty and respect. And some people said loyalty and respect are synonymous, they're separate, are they interconnected? But we talked about in particular how men should respect women. And some of the young men in my class were talking about, yeah, I would never strike a woman. I was raised to open the door for a woman. Walk on the outside of the street so the woman can walk on the inside of the street. And some kids are like, no, that's old-fashioned. Some women, they don't deserve it, and they weren't particularly respectful of women. We talked why this is, and we had a really good conversation. Then the fourth question I asked you, and we talked about, is in this land of the free, home of the brave, supposedly the richest nation in the world, why do we have such poverty? Why do we have so many people that are impoverished? And we talked about the roots of poverty. Is it bad decisions and laziness and they're scammers, or is it beyond their control that somebody left them, abandonment? Is it substance abuse? Is it mental illness? Is it generational? And these aren't easy questions, and they're certainly not easy answers. But again, it sounds more like a sociology class than a history class. So here's the question: how do these four things pertain to history? And hopefully I get this across to you as we move back into history about feudalism. It's a form of government that started in the Middle Ages. Feudalism only occurs when there is a weak central government because the king ends up giving away some of his land. That's on the most basic levels. Now, feudalism is a thing of the past. People don't run themselves using feudalism anymore. For instance, modern times, America, we have a democratic republic. We see a lot of democratic republics. We see other oligarchies and theocracies, but feudalism really is part of a past time. And this is the most simplified model that I could find. It's a political and social system based on the granting of land in exchange for loyalty, military assistance, and other services. The king's at the top, the nobles beneath the king, the knights beneath the nobles, and the peasants, the majority. And a lot of kids who are really sharp said, hey, that reminds me of the caste system when we learned about that, that triangle. And there is some degree of nobility, or mobility, Freudian slip, because I'm looking at nobility, but there is some degree of mobility. Nobles can rise to kings, knights can rise to nobles, so on and so forth. But there is no social mobility in the peasants. You're stuck. You are stuck. And the poor stay poor, and that's just the way it is. So here's the question. Why did it happen? Why feudalism? It developed as a result of frequent invasions from Western Europe. Remembering those barbarian groups of people. These are not orderly people. These are attacking, chaotic people. And I think it's human nature. Where you have chaos, you want order. Feudalism is very orderly, and it's a means of protecting their lands against these barbarians, and it provides an orderly structure to run yourself. And kings and nobles needed that way to protect their lands. Simple as that. And this is the triangle with pictures, a little prettier pictures. And you have the king and the queens, and then you have these people, nobles, who are trying to get into their favor, saying, hey, you're all like me the most. And if they get really well liked, they get a fiefdom. Fief, it's not a fife. A fife is that little flute, you know. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking fiefs, and the bigger the noble, the bigger piece of the pie they got. And then the people who protected that were the knights. The knights were, you know, the army and the police wrapped into one. And then beneath them were the peasants, the majority. And this system, this very insular system, was self-sustaining for many centuries. So say what you will about it, it lasted. And knights, that third group, had a code of chivalry, and this notion of knight in shining armor is still with us, whether it be from our fairy tales or the movies. This image of this, you know, man on a horse in armor, it still intrigues us today. Every August, there's the Renaissance Festival, and people get really into that, and probably the top event is the jousting that they do. So the knights were mounted warriors who protected the Lord's lands. They were given land for their service. That's what they got in return. And they lived by a code of chivalry. It was a code of ethics, and they followed it very, very strictly. If you did not follow this code, you could get ostracized or exiled from the knighthood, which would be the worst thing in the world, because to them, that was a big deal. And this code was based on honesty, fairness in battle, no cheap shots, no pot shots, loyalty, and the proper treatment of women. And if I were to say, you know, to a young man, hey, you're a very chivalrous young man, that's a compliment. And it's based on this knight's code of chivalry. And here's some more pictures, and this is the stuff you see in your picture books as a kid. You have the, you know, the aristocracy, the wealthy, the nobles in their beautiful dresses, living in castles, jousting, and you see, you know, the surfer, the peasant, just working hard. And this is the way it was for a long, long time in Europe and Russia. And here's another example of obligation. The knights were obligated to the Lord to provide military service, remain loyal and faithful, give money on special occasions, and in return, you know, land was given, protect from attack. Probably a better visual is this. This is the pyramid of feudal power. At the base, the majority are peasants and serfs. These are uneducated, unarmed people that really have little option except to work, and work really hard. And they provide labor and, you know, materials and food and whatnot, which go up to the knights, the lesser nobles. And in return for that labor, the knights protect the peasants. And above the lesser nobles or knights, we have the powerful nobles. Now, the knights provide loyalty and military service to the powerful nobles. In return, the powerful nobles give the knights a little bit of land, piece of the pie, and protection and favor to the higher-ups. And you can see this developing like a recycle logo, this very insular, self-sustaining system. And the powerful nobles report to the king. They provide loyalty and service, and if the king likes them, they give them a bigger fiefdom, and in return, you see the cycle. And again, it lasted a really, really long time, which brings us to the end. So let's connect these four things we talked about to feudalism. Obligation. In American modern times, we have obligation. You can choose how to handle them, and you can certainly choose which one's of the highest priority. In feudalism, your obligations were airtight, at risk of being ostracized, being exiled. You had to do it, and whatever level of that feudal society you were at, that gave you your obligation. You better follow it. Loyalty. Feudalism was based on loyalty. People, reporting up to the king, and the king demanding loyalty from his vassals and to the knights. This was a system predicated on loyalty, and any disloyalty disrupted the system. And I think there's a nice message there that loyalty is important. respect. Now, certainly the code of chivalry showed a code of respect for women, the knight's code of fighting fair. This shows a respect that may not be around in modern times. I think that's why people harken back to these days, because I think we miss that a little bit. And then poverty. The nice thing about America is you can go from rags to riches, and it doesn't always happen, obviously, and we still have a severe problem with poverty, but it is possible. It has happened. You can rise up from very, how can I put it, very, very challenging circumstances and rise up. A peasant back in feudal society, you're stuck with it. So that's feudalism, the governmental system of the Middle Ages. Thanks for watching.